Modern neuroscience tells us that instead of writing down things we're thankful for in a journal, simply listening to and connecting with positive stories about people can better help shift our immune system into balance. It can help us move from a state of constant anxiety towards motivation. So 3 days a week, I'm sharing stories we can feel good about. Mondays, you'll hear a story from the past to be thankful for. On Wednesdays, I'll tell an inspiring story from the present. And Fridays, you'll head into the weekend with a story to keep you optimistic about our future. Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to My Good 3. Okay, Happy New Year. You know, the quest for freedom for those without it has led to some inspiring acts of sacrifice and heroism throughout history. I immediately think of social activists like Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks in the United States, risking their own lives for the rights of other African Americans. Then there was Nelson Mandela in South Africa, fighting against apartheid for his people. And Tank Man, also known as the unknown protester in China, standing in front of tanks while standing up for the rights of Chinese students in the middle of Tiananmen Square, Beijing. There's also another kind of hero. Those who weren't being persecuted themselves, but fought for the freedom of those who were. They risked everything they had for a principle, for their belief in what was right. This is a story about one of these people, someone you may not have heard much about. A Polish army officer during World War II who volunteered to be captured very early on in the war. Posing as a Jewish man, he allowed himself to be arrested by the Germans and sent to a converted army barracks where Jewish people were being kept. His mission was to gather intelligence and help the prisoners capture their optimism and teamwork inside the new prison called Auschwitz. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901 in Western Russia. His family was originally from Lithuania, but had been deported to Russia during the 1964 uprising, and they remained sympathetic to Polish and Lithuanian causes. When Pilecki was 9, he and his mother moved back to Lithuania so he could attend a Polish school. By the time World War I began, Pilecki was 15 years old and joined a paramilitary group opposing the Russian Red Army. After the war, he enlisted in the Polish army and steadily rose through the ranks, eventually earning his commission. And in 1938, as a second lieutenant, he led his first unit, a military training squadron. As tensions grew between Poland and Germany, Pilecki became a key junior officer for the Polish army. But once Poland was invaded by both Germany from the west and Russia from the east, Pilecki and the Polish army were forced underground. He became a leading member of a secret Polish army and an early member of the resistance. The underground army had challenges internally. Key members believed that Poland's army should align based on religious ideological lines, similar to Nazi beliefs. Pilecki and others disagreed. So the underground was splintered into a far-right contingent and a more mainstream unit. News spread of something happening at the old army barracks in Auschwitz, where tens of thousands of Jewish people were being imprisoned. The mainstream Polish underground army knew they needed to find out exactly what was happening inside the barracks, so they needed someone on the inside. They devised a plan, and in the end, it was Pilecki who volunteered to infiltrate the camp as a prisoner. In September of 1940, carrying the identity of a Jewish man who had been mistakenly assumed to be dead, Pilecki was one of 2,000 men arrested and sent to the barracks at Auschwitz. He was assigned prisoner number 4859. At the old barracks, what Pilecki found was far more discouraging than anyone had imagined. Still, he focused on his goal of capturing and relaying the status of the camp to his army unit, while improving the morale of the inmates and setting up an intelligence network. He managed to live through the brutal beatings and slave labor, and even survived a case of pneumonia. Every now and then there would be a planned escape, and Pilecki would ensure whoever it was would deliver his report to the Polish army unit on the outside. The first report got out in October, which ended up being a key communication for the atrocities occurring inside the camp, allowing the Allies to plan accordingly. By 1943, conditions in Auschwitz were severe, and Pilecki knew it was only a matter of time before his cover was blown and he was executed. He had achieved his mission, having sent many reports about the status of the camp back to the Allies, and he had installed a functional intelligence unit among the prisoners. So on April 27th, he and 2 other prisoners attempted an escape. While assigned to a night shift at a camp bakery, they overpowered the guard and barricaded him inside. They cut the telephone line and then cut the camp alarm wire. They traveled on foot, and with the help of a priest and several locals along the way, they finally reached the Polish safe house, owned and operated remarkably by the same Jewish man whose identity he had assumed for nearly 3 years in Auschwitz. The report he drafted about the conditions at Auschwitz was critical information to the Allies as they planned the liberation of Europe. Pilecki continued to be an active member of the resistance, and once the war ended, he lived under various assumed names as he hid himself from the Soviet occupation force. At one point, he had a chance to flee the country with his family, but his wife was unwilling to risk the move with their children, so the family stayed together. However, in 1946, he was informed that his identity was uncovered by the Ministry of Public Security, and in May of 1947, he was arrested by communist authorities. He was tortured, although gave up no information, and then at a show trial was found guilty of espionage. In May of 1948, Witold Pilecki was executed. His bravery wasn't known by many after the war. In fact, it wasn't until the 1990s that Pilecki's story was released by the Polish archives, at which point his own family first learned of his heroism. This is one of those stories that helps me reflect on the good out there that we don't hear about. There's more than we realize. Witold Pilecki didn't live his life the way he did for notoriety. I think he always knew that his interest in fighting to support people being persecuted for nothing more than their religious beliefs would lead to his death. What he said just before he was executed was poignant. He said, "I've tried to live my life so that in the hour of my death, I would feel joy rather than fear." It wasn't the number of days in his life that drove Witold Pilecki. Instead, it was the goodness he felt while he lived that mattered. Thank you for listening. I realize this podcast won't be successful without your help. So if you'd like to rate it, or better yet, review it, wherever you get your podcasts, that would really help. And if you're on Instagram, go to @mygood3, THREE, to vote each episode up or down. I'm also excited to read more Good 3 stories from listeners, so just go to our website, mygood3.com, and submit a story of your own from the past, present, or future, or all three, and maybe I'll use it in an episode. Thanks again. Here's to hoping My Good 3 can set the stage for your good week.